Hey guys, what's up? Sora here, back with another Shadowverse video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the recently all released info of the Dawnbreak Nightedge Mini-Expansion. We're going to go through the cards, and I wanted to wait until all the cards were revealed. I didn't want to produce a video just highlighting a card, because that gave me a chance to wrap my thoughts around each card as they were revealed as well. I wanted to be more informative more than anything else. That way I can give you guys what I think these cards will do once the expansion or mini expansion hits tomorrow. So let's get started. Alright, the first legendary we're seeing is the one from Forest called Green Glen Axeman. He is a 7-drop 6/5 rush that gives your leader the following effect. At the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to the enemy leader if at least 3 cards were played this turn. So very attuned to control Forest, I believe. It certainly gives that deck reach. The fact that he has rush means that he can clear without using an evo point. The lower defense stat line means that he'll be easily traded into as a response. But all in all, a good card. Now the problem is, and the problem with a lot of the other cards in this video, is that it's not really useful right now. As far as the meta is concerned. If reach is what you're looking for control forest, there's plenty of options. Right now there's Jungle Warden, Crystalia Aaron, so on and so forth. So when they rotate out, then he might see a lot more play. But right now, he's definitely good enough to be experimented with at the very least. I foresee a lot of people trying to go for his build because it is a very powerful effect. 2 damage per 3 cards played, especially if you keep recycling your Wooded Brambles and stuff like that. That might be effective. Next, Storied Falconer. Storied Falconer is a 2-drop 1/3 that evolves with diminished stats into a 2/4. With Fanfare, put a Skystride Raptor in your hand, and then evolve, gave Bane to all the Skystride Raptors in your hand. Now, Skystride Raptor is a 3-drop 2/1 with Storm. Now, combined with Storied Falconer with the Evo, you're giving a 3-drop 2/1 Storm with Bane to a Skystride Raptor in your hand. Very reminiscent of the Dragon card, but without the overflow condition. He can see play. I wouldn't be surprised because even without the Evo, 2/1/3, then you drop a 2/1, that's a 2-drop 3 stats. 3/3 stats spread across 2 followers. Actually, it's even more than that. 2-drop, which then perfectly curves into 3. So you have a 2-drop 1/3, and then you have a 3-drop 2/1. That can be powerful. I don't know whether this will find a build in current Forest lists. Probably mid-range more than anything else. Maybe aggro. It could find a home there rather than a Fairy Whisperer, but right now aggro is in a pretty good spot. So I'm not that good of an aggro player to really determine this card's worth, but between those two lists, it might see play. Spartacus. Very powerful Swordcraft legendary. He has Fanfare, transform the Reaper at the bottom of your deck into a victory card. At the end of your turn, put 2 random officer followers from your deck into your hand. And then Evolve is the same stats. He doesn't lose stats on the Evolve, and he's only a 6. So many people are already very hype about this card because it is a new win condition for Sword, which is to deck yourself out. Normally, when you deck yourself out in Shadowverse, you get the Reaper card, which makes you automatically lose the game. Here, he transforms that to a victory card, which automatically makes you win the game. Control Sword, for sure. That's number 1, and probably comboing with Chronos, I would expect, because then that accelerates usually very long game to even faster, especially because Sword doesn't really have that many good draw mechanics. Now, where else do I see this card being played? It's kind of anti-Arthur because it's officer followers rather than commanders, so I'm not sure if those two will mesh together well, even though they draw each other cards. Definitely Spring Cleaning, something like that. Lux, and other things that just draw out their value officer followers. I can see that being played here. Now, the deck's only limitation is that it has to run Spartacus. Otherwise, you cannot win. So we'll see what happens, but it's a very interesting card, potentially very powerful, and may put Sword in a better spot than it already is. Next, Dario Demon Count, Swordcraft Gold. If this follower can be targeted, your enemy can only target this follower, cannot be destroyed by spells and effects, but can still take damage. So it's kind of a combination of Hero of Antiquity and Garetto Demon of Love, if I'm getting those names right. 2/2 or 2-drop 2/1, so diminished stats for the effect. Now he is a commander card, so it means that he plays well with Arthur. Arthur meaning that when you drop an Arthur board, they have to target him with kill spells first before they can target even anyone else. The problem is, right now in the meta, a lot of the Arthur boards are answered by board wipes, not necessarily targeted spells. Now don't get me wrong, there are going to be targeted spells from time to time where Dario might be able to save you, but for the most part, that interaction, as people have been talking about it, isn't really all that powerful. So I can see this rather functioning as a pseudo ward for something like Luminous Mage, where you drop a Luminous Mage, drop this, and then they can't target the Luminous Mage, they have to target this first in order to kill it. Something that is less answerable by board wipes, long story short. Or you can do even a Frontline Cavalier and then drop this, or something like that, where they can't target the Cavalier first, they have to target the Demon Count first. It can definitely mess people up. The 2/1 stat line is unfortunately not great in this current meta, because that means that it can't ever go above the 3. And 3 is kind of the magic number of avoiding a lot of removal spells right now, which he is designed to work with. So a little bit of anti-synergy there, but otherwise you can expect to see some experimentation on this at least. Alright, next card, Truthseeker Faust, Runecraft Legendary. Give your leader the following effect. At the end of your turn, if an allied follower is in play, perform Earthright, give +2/+1 to a random allied follower. This effect lasts for the rest of the match. So we have yet another emblem type effect for those of you guys who play Magic, this time in Rune. So he's a 5-drop 4/5 and then gets full evolve stats, so that's good. Now, for Earthright or Burn Rune by default, will this card see play? I would not expect it right now, at the very least. I can expect it probably in the next expansion, because right now Burn Rune doesn't really benefit from having a lot of the followers on board, to be honest. I can see this being played with Earth Golem, where they just burn through a lot of Earthrights. The problem right now is there's not a lot of generators for Earthrights. However, there is one notable exception to what I just said, which is Summoning Drills. For Summoning Drills, this card is pretty powerful as a combo. So what you do is you drop this first. Then you drop Summoning Drills, which then summons a 3/3 Guardian Golem, right? Then the effect triggers, giving +2/+1 to that 3/3 Golem, and also gives you another 0/2 Golem. So that's pretty powerful for turn for an interaction. The only problem is the earliest that can happen is turn 6. Now you can play another 2-drop in addition to the Summoning Drills ahead of that, but it's a little bit late for a 5/3. It's not necessarily unanswerable. Powerful effect, not unanswerable. So I would expect this to see play once we get a little bit more cards in the early game of Rune that would play well with Truthseeker Faust, like a lot more Earthright generators, stuff like that, that don't make you lose card advantage for the sake of giving +2/+1 to a random allied follower. Next, Burgent Onion Patchmaster. She's a 7-drop 5/5 Runecraft. Summon an Onion Patch as her fanfare. Give your leader the following effect. Whenever you play a spell, summon an Onion Patch. This ability is not stackable and lasts for the rest of the match. Now, the Onion Patch, let's take a look at that first, is a 2-drop 1/1 follower that whenever this follower attacks, spell boosts the cards in your hand. So that's pretty powerful on paper. You're giving everything a Rooney effect. every time you play a spell. So that's potentially pretty powerful. But again, the problem is, how does she fit in the current card list, right? Take a look at Giant Chimera Rune right now, which I would expect her to be in. She's the 7-drop, so she contends with Snowman King for that spot, right? It's kind of like, at that point you really need spell boost. Because imagine this, you play a 7-drop, so I would assume that the earliest 0 drops that you have would be, as far as spells are concerned, are Fiery Rune, right? So at best you're probably going to get 1 onion on turn 7, if not 0. So more likely you're going to get the payoff on turn 8. However, on turn 8, these things do not have rush. So they sit on the board until turn 9, and then you may be able to attack with them on turn 9, and then you drop your G-Gem. Is that likely to happen? Probably not, because again, a lot of decks that are fighting against Giant Chimera are aiming to just clear the board on 8 and 7, so that they have a clear way to just go face even before you get to your turn 9. So it's very, like I said, very powerful on paper. I'm not sure where in the meta she particularly fits right now, because the only big payoff for spell boost right now is Giant Chimera. Maybe in the next expansion, when there's another big payoff card for spell boost, she might see play. But right now, like I said, I'm not sure where she fits exactly. Alright, next card. White Frost Dragonute Feline. She's a Dragoncraft legendary, and 2-drop 1/3, evolves stats, diminish evolve stats into a 2/4. When she comes into play, you put a White Frost Whisper into your hand, and then when you evolve her, you deal 1 damage to an enemy follower. Now, that evolve mechanic actually plays well with her ability, with the card that she gives you. The card that she gives you is, why is that not listed? Hold on, there we go. White Frost Whisper is a legendary spell that says, choose an enemy follower and destroy it if it's already damaged. If it has not been damaged, deal 1 damage instead. So, long story short, you're talking about, hold on, sorry. Let's go back to her. Okay. Long story short, you're talking about a 2-drop that allows you to trade, assuming you have with anything on the board, assuming that you have a an evolve point and the spell. So long story short, 4-drop, evolve, kill anything on the board. That's kind of the basics of the card. Now, there's a lot more nuance to this card, honestly. You could choose not to play, you could choose not to evolve it and just have the White Frost Whisper in your hand, which is still a very powerful 2-drop spell in its own right. That can play well with PDK, for example, where PDK's effect doesn't quite reach, and you can just drop this and kill whatever big follower the opponent has on board. You also have the option of just playing her with PDK. They both mesh well with each other, being a 2-drop. So this deck I see really boosting the value of PDK more than anything else. And since that deck doesn't ramp as much, I can see some play from this. I can see some play from her. Potentially very powerful effect. You trade damage in a lot in this game. People try to get value, having a 6-1 on the board, 6-2. Very easy to ping off. Like, very versatile card. I highly, highly expect her to see competitive play once the mini expansion drops. Next, Dragonplate Warrior. Dragoncraft Gold, 8-drop, 7/7, gets full evolve stats. It also has Ward, and then give your leader the following effect. Whenever you play a non-follower card, deal 1 damage to an enemy leader. This effect lasts for the rest of the match. So Ramp Dragon card, definitely. I'm not sure how well it would perform. Because Lindworm deals damages in multiples of 10. So maybe you need to ping something down from 10, which makes sense, right? Especially because whenever you play a non-follower card, he already has some synergy with Lindworm himself. Now, as far as the body itself, 8 drop 7/7 is very, very respectable. Especially given Ward, although it's very susceptible to Bane. I'm not sure what to think of this card. It can be potentially really powerful, or it can be non-impactful. It really depends on the curving out, as I would say. So imagine this: you drop this on turn. You'll drop this obviously earlier than turn 8, but you drop this with 8 play points, right? Then when you get that 9 play points, the normal play would be Frenzied Drake. So instead of Frenzied Drake, you just cast a bunch of spells, clear the board, dealing 1 damage every single time. That, theoretically, should be the best possible outcome for this. But that 1 damage ping might not matter as much, given the nature of Ramp Dragon, which is to not really care about the leader until they can just swing in with Lindworm and a half, maybe. So maybe that and a half, like 5 points of damage would be enough to bring someone down to 10, and then have Lindworm just finish. And that 5 would be coming from this card. I don't really know. I feel that it can see at least some experimentation on it. It's just too bad that it only has Ward, and doesn't really clear the board by himself. I would rather have this have Rush rather than Ward, personally, because I'm not sure what threat you would need to be guarding against with Dragonplate Warrior, given the current meta. But Ward is still a very powerful effect, so we shall see what happens once this card drops. Okay, next. Shadowcraft Legendary, Arcus, Ghostly Manager. He has Fanfare. Give your leader the following effect. Whenever you play a follower that originally cost 3 play points or less, destroy that follower and summon X ghosts. X equals original cost of that destroyed follower. So, very reminiscent of Heresy's Avatar, really. Where instead of dropping amulets, you drop low-cost followers. And he also is a 7-drop 6/6 that gets full evolve stats. 6/6 is not bad at 7. It can be better, but it's not bad at all. Now, as far as the effect is concerned, let's take a look at the 2-drops right now that are present in Shadowverse that has last words, because that's really the overall effect of this, right? So let's say you drop a 2-drop along the lines of, I don't know, Orator of Bones. What has last words? The new Shadow card, which we'll talk about later. Not really anything that's terribly too powerful, but there is some potential here because you summon ghosts, which all have Storm, by the way, in case people forgot. So you make your 2-drops into essentially spells that can either go face or go to trade with the board. Potentially very, very powerful. However, to make it really powerful, there needs to be a lot more powerful last words effects on 2-drops or 3-drops, really. Right now, I don't recall anything in Shadow that falls into that category, but given enough really powerful last words effects in the next expansion, then he'll be the centerpiece of the deck. So I can see, like I said, like with many of the cards on this list, I feel that he'll shine a lot more in the future expansion. However, right now, it doesn't mean that he won't be playtested with. A very, very competitive worthy, I would say. Definitely, I will be messing around with him if I pull a bunch of him. And we'll see where we go from there. Because that's potentially very, very powerful. Very, very powerful effect. Alright. The next Shadow card is the gold Lord Deathskull. And he has the last words, give a random allied follower last word, summon a skeleton. And then when you evolve, instead of the skeleton, give random allied follower last word, summon a zombie. He's a 2-drop 1/3. So given the 3 stat line, he's unlikely to die on turn 3. Long story short, I think this is a very powerful card for Shadow. A lot of people have been downplaying this card. I'm not one of those people. I think this card is pretty darn good. Not game breaking or anything like that, but it's definitely a card that Shadow needed. Because right now, the only way that you really get that skeleton game going is with Prince Catacomb, and he doesn't drop until 4. So in the early game, he's an all-star. In the late game, not as much, although again, very welcome effect in addition to Prince Catacomb. So he helps guarantee the Ectors and stuff like that. He helps generate shadows enough for Hinterland Ghoul. I definitely see him seeing a lot of play. The only question really is how consistent you can get that last words effect, because a lot of people will obviously want to trade first into the rest of the board before dealing with him. But maybe by doing that, they run into a lot of inefficient trades to not let you get that skeleton, you know what I'm saying? So, definitely a card that Shadow needed. Whether it's going to be in the next expansion or this one remains to be seen. For me, he's definitely going on all my Shadow lists, just because I do think that card is a powerful effect. Next card, Waltz, King of Wolves. He's the Bloodcraft legendary. Fanfare, put a Blood Moon onto your hand. Blood Moon is a 3-drop amulet that allows you to be in Vengeance for 3 turns. And whenever an allied Blood Moon comes into play, evolve this follower. Okay, so the idea is you dropped him on 3, then you drop the Blood Moon on 4, and then you get a 5/4 that is ready to swing face, really. The Blood Moon, however, is a tempo loss by itself. So I'm not sure how well these effects really play with each other. The other potential effect of this is on turn 6, where you get him plus the Blood Moon in turn at the same time. You can trade with the board. Trading at the board with a 5/4, it'll still trade pretty competently along that range. But again, it's you're granting tempo to a tempo loss card, or rather, you're granting tempo by giving creating a tempo loss card in your deck. So I'm not sure how well that would all work. Definitely playtest worthy, especially for people that are trying to not mess with Belphegor, or trying to improve their matchup against Haven, which really gives Vengeance Blood a hard time. Now, whether he'll be a card that replaces Belphegor remains to be seen. Belphegor is pretty dang powerful, especially the draw 2 cards versus just drawing a Blood Moon. You can't really compare the two. However, he does land a turn earlier, so there might be some possibility there. He gets full stat evolve, although he's a little bit more aggro side, so 5/4, a little bit easier to trade into. Long story short, I think he's playtest worthy. I can see him going in some mid-range Bloodless, maybe even aggro? No, probably not, because Blood Moon doesn't really do much. Well, no, I take that back. Blood Moon can do a lot for aggro right now, however, they will run out of gas if they switch out Belphegor for this. So, we'll see. However, it is to be noted that Belf and Blood Moon have an interaction on themselves, because you're already in Vengeance when Blood Moon is in play, so when you play the Belphegor, you just draw 2 cards automatically without losing any life. So, I can potentially see him exploding out of the gate, if not, waiting for the next expansion when Belphegor rotates out. Next, we have Raven Eventide Vampire, the Bloodcraft Gold. She's a 2-drop 1/1 that says if you have 2 play points and Vengeance is active for you, choose. Play this card as Raven Noontide Vampire or Raven Midnight Vampire. And then she has a Fanfare, summon a Forest Bat. Now let's take a look at her choose forms. Once I see it. Where is it? Hold on. Oh, no. Come on. Oh, here we go. I didn't see the menu at the bottom. Sorry, guys. Okay. Raven Noontide Vampire is a 2-drop 1/1 still summon a forest bat, and whenever an allied summon or allied forest bat comes into play, restore 1 defense to your leader. Versus Midnight Vampire, which then states, Fanfare, summon a forest bat. Whenever an allied forest bat comes into play, deal 1 damage to the enemy leader. I'm not sure what to think of this card. At least not yet. 2-drop 1/1 isn't a strong effect. However, the ability to summon a forest bat, that kind of puts her in contention with the current 3-drop right now, which also has the same Fanfare effect, but just has the last words on top of it. So can potentially see play. The unfortunate part is that Vengeance has to be active, but again, maybe with Waltz, that has some form of play in there, where you give where you give yourself Vengeance, and then she drops with a 1/1 that can either heal you or deal 1 damage. I honestly expect the choose effect here. If I were to predict anything, I would expect the choose effect here to be a bonus, because I would normally play this just as a 2/1/1, a 2-drop 1/1, that then produces to create another body. That early play, that those 2-drop 1/1s, especially if you already had a turn 1 play, that's pretty strong in aggro. So you spread your 1 damage across 3 different bodies, making it hard to deal with on the early turns. And then on the late game, it just provides the reach, just in case you just need that last ping of damage. I really don't see the Noontide Vampire being played as much as the Midnight Vampire, given all the lists on aggro right now. So does she work in Bat Blood? I don't really know, because she herself is not a forest bat. So it's not like she's going to replace Summon Bloodkin or anything like that. But maybe there's some room in the deck for some optimization. So I'm definitely going to mess with the deck, because I still do want to play Aggro Blood update with an updated version with her in it. So we'll see what happens. Next, we have the Haven Legendary, Tutankhamun. He is a 6-drop 6/4 with full evolve stats, and he has the last words. If this follower's defense was at least 2 before being destroyed, summon another of him and set its defense to 1. This is potentially very powerful. 6/4 will put him out of range with a lot of the banish effects. Assuming he trades into something that's less than 2 power, really hard to get rid of him. Very, very sticky on the board. And if Corpse Lord of Woe has taught us anything, it's that if something replaces itself on the opponent's turn, on your turn, then it's free to swing. Whether Haven needs this type of card or not remains to be seen, but on paper, it's a very powerful card. Other people have noted that this also plays well with Pegasus. This also plays well with, what's her name? The one that is a 6-drop that gives everything +0, +1 across the board. I'm forgetting her name right now. Long story short, they all play well with each other. So, Eater of the White Wing. Yeah, now finally I remember. Eater of the White Wing. So, I can see some shenanigans happening here. Now, whether it's going to be better than Summit Haven right now remains to be seen. But I would love to run a Haven deck that doesn't depend on Summit Haven, because that means a little bit more opportunity for Dark Jean to shine. So, for sure, I think this is definitely playtest worthy, potentially very powerful, potentially will replace Heavenly Aegis in some lists, make it a little bit more aggro heavy, play well with Dark Jean and stuff like that. So, especially with Dark Jean, because even if you kill him with Dark Jean, assuming that he had 2 defense, when you kill him with Dark Jean, he comes back anyway. So, a lot of potential jankiness with that card, but jankiness that might work. So, people that are dismissing this card, I would watch out. I would watch out, because like I said, if you played against Corpse of Woe, it's a potentially very powerful effect. Alright, next card, White Fang Temple. Havencraft Gold. Countdown 8, which is a lot. At the end of your turn, restore 1 defense to your leader. Whenever an effect restores defense to an ally, subtract 1 from this amulet's countdown. And then last word, summon a Holy Winged Dragon, which is a 6/6 5-drop, I think. Now, I don't see this card being played. Because I don't think this is the savior that Tenko Shrine is looking for, really. Because this deck is meant to be working in tandem with that card. The unfortunate part is it doesn't really do anything else other than count down to a 6/6, right? So even no matter how many times you trigger a life gain, right now in the current meta, it doesn't trigger often enough where this drops any turn later than turn 5. So I really see this card being really subpar. I don't think it's the Haven card that Tenko Shrine was looking for. I think we might see more support for it in the later expansions where we see a lot more life gain effects on 1-drop, 2-drop cards, maybe even 3-drop cards. Right now, there's really not a lot. So I don't know. I really don't think this card will see play, unfortunately. And this is the card that, one of those cards that has to wait until the next expansion. Next, Portalcraft Legendary, Electro-Magical Rhino. He's a 7-drop 0/7 that has full of all stats, and then has Rush. Fanfare, gain plus X plus 0. X equals the number of remaining artifact cards in your deck. Whenever this follower attacks, put 3 artifact Rhino cards into your deck. So, at the bare minimum, he is a 7-drop that when he attacks, he'll be a 3/7. At the bare minimum, he'll probably be more than that, but at the bare minimum, he'll be a 3/7. Now, then he produces more 3 artifact Rhinos into your deck. He himself, I do not think is an artifact, although the token might be. Hold on, let's see if I can get the token up. Yeah, so the token is an artifact. So, okay. If you imagine this with Deus Ex Machina, then it becomes a 6-drop. So you get a little bit of a cheat there. I don't think this meshes well with Acceleration, but if you did have Acceleration in play, then it becomes a 5-drop. And 5-drops are typically the kind of tipping point for a lot of cards. Where if you play something for 5, then it means that you can play something else of very significant value once you get to turn 10. Now, whether Portal really needs this card right now or not, I'm not really sure. Right now, let's take a look at the worst matchup for Portal, Artifact Portal, which is going to be Forest, either mid-range or aggro. For aggro, he drops too late. For mid-range, you're telling me that he does a better job than Saphira, who can actually end the game, even though she doesn't replicate herself, or I don't know. Yeah, there's really no, or Magna Legacy, which can clear a board. You're asking for a lot by putting him in. Now, granted, he is a card that has pseudo recursion and also potentially just has a ginormous offense stat, but you have to wait a turn in order to get that. Given that he has a high defense stat, that really helps his case a lot, because it's hard to trade into him. Only Portal, the mirror match, would be able to trade relatively effectively into him without relying on any sort of Bane or anything like that. So, long story short, playtest worthy, I would say. I'm not sure how much further he gets from there, but playtest worthy. I would expect some Portal lists to run him for at least 2 weeks. See how he plays, see if he meshes well. Because at this point, the judgment is too close to call, where you just need to play him to see how he curves out with other cards, how well he meshes well with other cards. Because right now, you're looking at something that has big defense stat with an even potentially bigger offense stat. At the very least, it's better than Mail of Obliteration, which does not have Rush. The fact that he has Rush actually saves him a lot here. So we'll see. We'll see. Next, we have Heartless Battle Portalcraft card. Choose, summon either a Lloyd the Android or a Victoria, and then put a puppet into your hand. In hand 7, then give the summon follower +0/+3 and Bane. Alright, so first of all, this card has the best art out of all the mini expansion cards, so it already wins an award for that. Now, comparing it to the other chromatic duel, right? This card is very reminiscent of that card. However, I do think it is a weaker version of that card because you can choose only either one, and the enhance doesn't give you the both. Instead, it gives the summon follower +0/+3 and Bane. Now, let's actually evaluate this card pretty closely. Let's start evaluating on 5. So on 5, you either summon a Lloyd the Android by itself, which has ward, and then it also has the Garetto love effect, right? Or a Victoria, which has rush, and whenever this follower attacks an enemy follower, deal X damage equal to its follower's attack first. Alright, so on 5, I would assume that the play would be Victoria 90% of the time, because a 1/4 with ward doesn't really do much on turn 5. Even putting the puppet into your hand, so Victoria, you summon the Victoria, you have the puppet in your hand, you can trade with anything that has at least or at the most 4 power or 4 defense, and still keep Victoria in play. And having Victoria in play is very, very dangerous, because if that Victoria lives for that turn, very easy to just effectively clear the board from there on out. So 90% of the time, probably going to be Victoria. On 7, give the follower +0/+3 and Bane. Now that's where potentially Lloyd becomes exceedingly gross, because you're talking about a 1/7 that has to be targeted first before your opponent can target anything else. Now here's the problem. You're talking about cards at 5-drop or 7-drop that theoretically would fit in Puppet deck that doesn't really solve the mid-range problem. Because right now, Puppet Portal's biggest problem is it doesn't have a good mid-game plan. It has a pretty strong early game, especially with the ability to trade with puppets, and a pretty strong late game, assuming you have the puppet in your hand. Theoretically, Heartless Battle, because it generates a puppet, helps in that regard. However, Victoria and Lloyd the Android are not strong enough to compete with the mid-game of other cards. Let's take a look at Cernian Hind, for example. Would you equate this to have the same power level to even try to deal with the Cernian Hind? Or let's say, like even Frontline Cavalier, which is a silver, right? Or Frontline General. Oh, no, not Frontline General, sorry. The sword card that is a 4-drop, when you evolve, you generate 2 1/2s. Whatever her name is. Even if you had this on turn 5, can you really deal with that board? I don't think so, because Victoria would at most trade with the 4/5, given with the puppet and everything like that, but you still have a 1/2 on board, which then just easily trades into this. So even against sword, which Portal should theoretically be stronger against, there is an answer to this card at any stage of the game. Now, even if you take the 7-drop, give Lloyd the Android at the most, even with the Evo, right? So a 3/9 with Bane. Given that he's only a single follower, it's very easy, relatively easy to deal with him, honestly. You can deal with him with any sort of Bane itself. He's annoying, to be sure, given the Bane, but I mean, a Bane on a ward is pretty powerful but single target or single follower, big follower spells right now aren't really in the meta. It's more spreading your board around. So maybe again in the next expansion we can see something along these lines, but this is not the mid game that Puppet desperately needed. It helps. It certainly is better than nothing, but I don't think it'll solve the problem of Puppets right now, which is that it doesn't really have an impactful board on turns 4, 5, 6, 7. This is a reactionary card that helps it catch up, but definitely not something that will help them survive in the mid game. And the last card is Oceanus. Oceanus is a gold neutral, which has fanfare. Choose. Put either a Rueful Droplet or a Ruthless Waterspout into your hand. She's also a 4-drop 3/4 that gains full stats on evolve. Let's take a look at the choose cards first. Rueful Droplet is a neutral gold that restores 2 defense to an ally, so it can restore defense to followers, notably. Ruthless Waterspout is a 3-drop, destroy an enemy follower with 4 defense or less. Potentially very powerful. Not because of its raw power level, but because of its versatility. Restoring 2 defense might just be enough to put them out of range of those 3-drop kills or 3 damage kill spells. And especially given at 1, it's really, really cheap. So it's a card that replaces itself, gives it an effect and stuff like that. Ruthless Waterspout is even potentially more powerful. I mean, it's a less effective Dragon Strife Blade. It's a less effective, Zombie Party, because it's 2 rather than 3, so the cost is pretty heavy. But I mean, anything that says destroy an enemy follower 4 defense or less, on 3, it easily combos with other 2-drop or 3-drop cards in the mid game. Potentially could get you there. I wouldn't rule this card out. It's for those cards that really need a strong mid game, again, like the artifact, like the Puppet Portal we just talked about. So Oceanus in Puppet Portal, I wouldn't be surprised if she appears there. I really wouldn't be surprised. Any deck that has a weak mid game can benefit a lot from Oceanus, is what I'm saying. Potentially very powerful, if not versatile card. I would expect her to see some competitive play. Looking forward to playtesting with her very, very soon. And yeah, that's the expansion, guys. So the mini expansion, I was very skeptical for it as an idea because it made pulling Dawnbreak Nightedge cards really awkward, if nothing else. But given that it's arriving tomorrow, I'm glad that we're getting these new cards. I think out of all the cards, Spartacus is a card to watch out for. What else? Feline is definitely a card to watch out for. Lord Deathskull for sure. And Tutankhamun, yeah, people are downgrading this card. I would be surprised if this did not surprise people. And Oceanus being the all-star versatile card. Do I expect this to shake up the meta? No. The creators of Shadowverse said that they wanted to shake up the meta before the next rotation. I'm not sure if this entirely did the trick. There's still a lot more cards that are designed for the next expansion rather than this current meta. So I'm assuming that they decided on the cards way before the meta even took shape, and this was just unlucky where a lot of these cards do not matter in the current meta, at least in my opinion. But almost all of them I can see potential for in the next expansion. Which then begs the question, should these cards have been released on the next expansion instead? My answer is yes, but my answer is also I'm glad we're getting them now. Because if nothing else, we get a preview of these cards before we play with them, see what life is after Belphegor, see what life is after Jungle Warden, stuff like that. We get to mess with the cards that we know are going to replace the optimal cards that we have right now. And for some of them, they're really powerful. Like, people have been downgrading the power level of these cards, and I don't think so. I think a lot of these cards will make definitely a splash on the deck. The one sole exception where I feel that the card is a meta-defining card is definitely Spartacus. Spartacus, I think, will define an entirely new deck for Sword. Probably alongside Kronos. We'll see if he's really that needed, but him alone will create a new deck. So for that particular card, I give kudos to Cygames. And yeah, so that's it for now, guys. Thank you guys for watching. I'm looking forward to pulling some cards tomorrow. Expect like an opening. I think I have like 40 packs of Dawnbreak Nightedge plus some gold. So We'll definitely be pulling some cards. Let's see whether we can play with some of these cards or not. But until then, thank you guys for watching. This has been Sora. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.